Europe has very small armies. Combined, they would be still only about the 1/3 the size of Russia's army if you put them all together. They don't have any intact industrial production lines producing tanks, armored vehicles, artillery shells, combat aircraft. In fact, what the United States wants Europe to do is buy that from the United States, which the United States is making at a pretty slow pace. Right now, we can produce 550 Patriot missiles a year. 6 of those, for every incoming missile from Russia that they're fired at, you're going to use at least two Patriot missiles going after it. Just do the math. You got 550 will last you a month. But then, in fact, that's the United States can only produce that for a year. So, yeah, it's a legitimate criticism of Europe. I think the one message Europe probably got out of this week's exchange with Secretary of Defense Hegseth and then J.D. Vance and probably Marco Rubio is, we're not best friends anymore. Or we're going to start seeing other people that's been in this relationship, and you show up and the girlfriend telling ugly fat Europe, we're going out with some more attractive people than you. Why is Germany deindustrializing? Would it have anything to do with the fact that the United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline and cut off Germany from cheap sources of natural gas and was intent on preventing Germany from buying gas and oil from Russia at relatively cheap prices, which would allow its industry to be competitive? The United States needs to take responsibility for helping create this mess. Yeah, he's absolutely right. It's not just Europe that's deindustrializing. Look in the goddamn mirror. The United States is not some industrial powerhouse. We are dependent. We've offshored much of our industry. Now, Trump wants to change that. At least he says he wants to bring it back home. But the United States is long, long ways from what it was 50 years ago, as far as an industrial base. They're talking about a strength that doesn't exist. So they're not in a position to do it. They can't change they can't change the war on the ground. They can't change the trajectory that this thing's going. They're delusional. Europe right now is in a state of shock based upon what they've heard from both Trump, Pete Hegseth, and now J.D. Vance. They're in absolute shock. And again, I'll put it in terms of personal relationships. Imagine that you're dating a girl and the fiance, you got marriage planned, the marriage is scheduled and everything. And all of a sudden, she shows up and says, wedding's off, I'm not marrying you. It's been nice knowing you. It's that kind of shock that's going on here with Europe. They've just been blindsided. So this is Iran's a straw man. Iran's not the problem. Israel's the problem. Israeli settlers, it's not Israel's the Zionists. Really, Iran's behind all the terrorism in the Middle East? Iran's behind ISIS? Iran's behind al-Nusra? Iran's behind Hayat Tahrir al-Sham? No, that would be the United States. That would be the United Kingdom. That would be Turkey. That'd be Saudi Arabia. They're pissed at Iran for supporting Hamas and Hezbollah. We are the enablers of Israel. We enable their ability to kill Palestinians and other people throughout. It is, that's what he wants. Russia's saying no. Or as they say in Russia, niet. Not going to happen. He can long to be treated like Israel. And to be treated like Israel means first you got to get a multi-billion-dollar lobbying firm like the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee to go out and bribe members of Congress so that they give you everything that you want. And in fact, I think what they're going to discover is that in part has happened, that has been money flowing out of Ukraine into the pockets of members of Congress and certainly members of the Biden administration. As I mentioned last Friday, I know of one particular case where they're tracking right now some $49 billion that were stolen out of money that the United States provided to the UK and made its way into the banks in the Caribbean. Yeah, he's not going to get it. And the record, the actual, how do you measure terrorism? You measure it with actual attacks and number of people killed and wounded, okay? Very simple, not complicated. Go back over the last 20 years. The reality is Hezbollah and Hamas have been involved with very few of those kinds of incidents. They do not appear in any significant way on the U.S. data collected by the Central Intelligence Agency and then published in the country reports on terrorism. It's a mythology. And if anything, God, if I'm the Ayatollah, Ali Khamenei, and I'm listening to him to Marco Rubio, and Rubio says, man, if Iran gets a nuke, we can't touch them. And I go, so you're telling me if I get a nuke, you're going to leave me alone? Hey guys, nuke time. Now, that's not what's happened up to this point, because I would suggest that the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has more integrity and than Marco Rubio or anyone else in the U.S. government. So they've shied away from it. But then they've signed an agreement with Russia. And Russia is also of the mind that they prefer that they not see an expansion of nuclear weapons, nuclear technology. Now, Iran's certainly got the intellectual talent to do it, and they've got the material with enriched uranium to do it. But up to this point, they've chosen not to. Yeah, and I'm afraid the only cure for this insanity is going to be them losing their lives, which means a horrific war. Again, you listen to Rubio's comments, he's looking at it only in terms of what Israel has suffered. And really, compared to what the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank are suffering at the hands of the Israelis, there's no comparison. The level of destruction, death, false imprisonment, torture, Israel's out of control. And it's unfortunate that what these crazed Zionists are doing puts such a stain on Judaism. And it's important to note that there are many Jews that have spoken out against this as a violation of what they believe to be their faith. Iran is a straw man. You've got to have an external villain to always point to justify why you are not fixing problems at home or addressing the real issues in your own society. That's one of the things, as a parallel I've maintained. As long as the United States continues to impose an embargo on Cuba and such, we create an external enemy that the Cubans can naturally point to and say, hey, listen, everything's going wrong here. Follow those gringos, not us. Take away the sanctions and all of a sudden force them to stand on their own. This obsession of the West to decide what other countries, peoples want to believe or should believe or what they want, where we don't even apply those standards to ourselves in our own society. Unfortunately, listening to that, I don't think there's much of an opening for Trump to negotiate a new deal with Iran, simply because Iran doesn't trust the West. Why should they? They've got a deal. They're going to work with Russia and China. They trust them, and they've got a military relationship with both. So I think we're witnessing the death of the West, and the fracturing of the relationship between the United States and Europe is the first step in that. And Europe itself can't come together as a cohesive organization. And Trump is going to do what Trump's going to do for the interest of the United States as he sees it. And if that means abandoning Europe, so be it. So this notion that Iran is the enemy and Iran has to be defeated is it is a genuine belief of both the most people in the United States and in Israel. But it's a lie. It's a lie that Iran's the number one sponsor of terrorism. It's not. And Iran has been a victim and a target of Western terrorism for well over 25 years, actively involved, up to and including the assassinations of nuclear scientists and bombs going on. I think the British Army that inhabited the American colonies in 17th, they had more soldiers here in the colonies at the time than they do in the current army right now. Think about that. All the United States can do is just ignore the UK, and then at that point, what's the UK going to do? They're like a nasty little dog with no teeth. Loud, yeah, but they don't have troops. We got a few nukes, but hell, their Navy can't even get out of its ports. The UK is a joke anymore. It's an absolute joke. And they're playing dress up, pretending to be a great military power. They're not. And they really, frankly, haven't been a great military power. That ended with World War I. They burnt themselves out there, survived World War II because of the United States and the Soviets. But now, having to face reality. This is really another example of this woke mentality. They're the ones that try to reduce competition in sports so that there were no losers. Everybody's a winner, get a participation trophy. Yeah, Europe's getting a participation trophy, but they're getting beat. And they've let the United States basically humiliate them too. So yeah, this world order governed by the G, it's increasingly irrelevant. The signs are that the next decade, the next 20 years, the countries that are going to play the dominant role, China, Russia, India, the United States. They're the big countries or the big economies. Europe's fading. They're really a second-rate region. This has been more about a colonial U.S., let's call it neo-colonial empire initiative. And going forward, Europe needs to pull its own weight. And if they're going to sanction, Trump said, if you're going to put tariffs on goods that we send to you, we're going to put tariffs on goods you send us. And if you don't put tariffs on us, we're not going to put tariffs on you. It would be equal. But I really think this week marked the start of the end of NATO. It became very clear when Hegseth said, hey, if you send French, German, British troops to Ukraine to help secure the peace, you're not doing it under NATO auspices. You don't get to claim if you get shot and killed and attacked that it's an Article 5. And, hey, we ain't playing that. You're on your own. And, if Ukraine wants some more weapons, you provide it, not us. We've done our bit. We're done. And that was the message. That was genuinely shocking. Europeans bet a lot of money, and particularly the Brits. They were hoping that basically some of this money was seen as a loan to Ukraine, and that they were going to secure rights to critical minerals assets in Ukraine. That's not going to happen now. Whatever they hoped to take from Ukraine economically is disappearing. The Russians are going to control the critical resource-rich regions. But the reality is there is no majority consensus. That's part of the problem. Europe's lost. And what they've come up against is, here in the United States, at least, we've had a majority consensus. They're tired of this whole woke mentality. They're tired of being told that white men are bad, that you're evil. And there's been that pushback with Trump. The key thing, I think, for Europe is there's no majority viewpoint. You can't point to one party that represents 51, 52, 60% of the people. They're all at 24%. They talk about, oh man, AfD, boy, they're coming on strong. They got 27% of the support. And that's considered significant. Well, maybe it is. Now, the folks on, even whatever you want to call that, the left, the woke crowd, the globalists, they don't like it and they're pushing back. And they certainly don't like it in Europe. But I think Trump and Vance are now basically saying, we don't care. We think you're wrong. And Europe is reeling from that. They're shocked. Europe is an underage child as far as the United States is concerned. They bring nothing to the table. They don't control vast swaths of vast resources. They don't have huge sums of money, large numbers of soldiers, military equipment. They're along for the ride, and they've been freeloading. The other dimension to this that's maybe factoring into Trump's thoughts, particularly with the UK, is it was British intelligence that played a major role in helping perpetrate the Russiagate fraud against Trump. It was a British MI6 officer, former Christopher Steele. So I don't think Trump's got a lot of He doesn't have the time of day for the Brits. The special relationship with them, screw them. That's probably Trump's attitude. And frankly, I don't blame him. Part of the problem has been anyone that's ever dealt with the Europeans, and I have over the years, going back to my time at the State Department 36 years ago. There's an era, you got a lot of very pleasant people, a lot of very smart people, cultured, but there's an arrogance there of they're better than you. You Americans are crude. We're sophisticated. You catch that vibe out of them. And yet they have indulged this woke agenda. Candidly, go into Germany, in Berlin, the sex clubs that have existed there for years, there's a level of moral degeneracy that the Germans have accepted just as normal, that the rest of the world is shocked and appalled at. The Germans have chosen their own path, as have the Brits, as have the French. But I return to emphasize the key point. There's not a majority view. It's broken up. It's balkanized. You got lots of minority views, and that's just whichever minority groups get together to decide to work together on a temporary basis. But there's no consensus about what does it mean to be German. Germany used to consider itself a Christian nation, no longer. Same for France. You've seen the role of the Catholic Church through much of Europe. It was a very powerful force going into the middle of the 20th century. Now it's become significantly less. And that's the irony, because in Russia, the Eastern Orthodox Church is strong and growing stronger and plays a central role in the government. You don't see anything like that in any of the rest of Europe. Well, Europe, almost across the board, is in a significant recession. They're economically struggling. They're not prospering. They're not facing low unemployment and not able to find workers because all the factories are up and running. Particularly, you got to worry about the big three, about Germany, France, England, or the United Kingdom. All three are in real trouble. Germany is deindustrializing. Europe is irrelevant, which is the reality. Europe is, as I said, is they are the attendant. Like a professional golfer will have a caddy. That's all Europe is. Europe's a lousy caddy. They're a tag along. They don't bring anything to the table. They bring very little money. So still the Europeans, yeah, we can supply weapons to Ukraine. You buy them from us and you can send them to them. Yeah, buy all of our Abrams, or we'll make them for you, the Europeans, and whatever you do with them, hey man, it's your business. They've got a problem in Europe where they've wanted to unite, to have, we're European. So you've got this disconnect, because in each country, you've got nationalists in Germany and France and England and Italy and Spain, Portugal, Romania, you just go down the list, Poland, that they value their own nation first and foremost, and they don't want to necessarily have it sacrificed on the altar of Brussels. But that's where it's been. And now they got themselves in a real dilemma. Who, as you correctly note, who speaks for the people of Europe? The folks, Orban and Fico, they've got a completely different perspective from, say, Tusk and Macron and Starmer. So there is no unity, and that lack of unity spills over into NATO as well. But if they in any way try to block, the Baltic states are they're going to try to block the Russians from exiting, well, the Russians will blow them out of the water. Then what are they going to do? Russia is going to defend its interests, as it should. This is these constant attacks by these other countries, particularly the Baltic states. To treat modern-day Russia as if it was the Soviet Union is a level of ignorance and foolishness that I don't have words to describe. And let's look again at the effect of the sanctions. As a result of the sanctions, Russia's economic growth last year is 4.1%. Healthy. Yeah, they've got some inflation. And it wasn't just Russia claiming that. World Bank and IMF both had to revise their projections, because originally they were saying, Russia's only going to grow 2%. That doubled that. Whereas in Europe, they're doing the exact opposite. The Baltic states, they made a big to-do the other day about cutting. Oh, we're no longer going to accept Russian energy. We're cutting it off. Their costs went up 300%. And they're buying electricity from Europe, electricity that's generated by Russian oil that the Europeans are buying to run their jets. It's crazy. All of this is nothing more than twisted political theater. There's no the real substance in it. Nobody thinks through. So yeah, they want to impose sanctions on Russia. Go ahead. Russia is self-sufficient. I've made that point for 3 years now. They don't need anything from the West, which is one of the things they came to discover as a result of the sanctions. Whereas Europe and the United States, they do have needs of some of the rare earth minerals, if nothing else, uranium. They need what Russia has. And so when they impose these sanctions, they are just hurting themselves. Now, so I think Trump is going to end U.S. involvement in NATO, but he's not going to do it in an upfront confrontational way. It's going to be it'll die away. But one of the reasons, because many of these NATO countries, most prominently the United Kingdom, were actively involved in spying and developing a covert action against Donald Trump in 2016 to try to prevent him to become president, and then continued to try to sabotage and undermine him. They meddled in the U.S. presidential election, UK especially. I think that's one of the reasons that the United States turned to the Brits last week or a week and a half ago and said, okay, you're in charge of the group now that has to round up all the support for Ukraine. You take on that job, knowing full well that the Brits can't do it and that they'll fall flat on their face. It's just, it's one other message. The Brits are not the friends of the United States, or at least of the Trump crowd. They may like the blue hair, green hair crowd, but that's not Trump. So this individual who, just what a pathetic sight. You get all weep. You know what they're weeping over is the years of taking money from the United States and getting wealthy. My understanding is the average member of the European Union that is there as a delegate, they made like $250,000 a year. It's a huge amount of money. This is a money train. That's part of the reason I think the United States doesn't want to be around people like that. I can say I have a couple of derogatory expressions in mind that I just probably better not for me to say. But Europe's irrelevant. The United States, on the one, let's talk about practically, economically, militarily. No reason in the world that the United States should be there, being the front line of defense for Europe. This ain't 1946, and even then it was a lie. We had to protect Europe from the Soviets. No, it was really probably, I think, more of a plan of Western imperialism and this needless confrontation with the then Soviet Union. But what Russia is today, it's not the Soviet Union. It's not a communist state. And these people that continue to push the lie that Putin and others are intent on reconstituting, quote, the Russian Empire. I like it. You remember all those Russian colonies in Africa and Asia and South America? Neither do I, because they didn't exist. It is the height of hypocrisy to listen to anybody from the United States or Europe talk about colonial empire, Russia being an empire, aspiring empire, when it's the United States and Europe that have been consistently going out, occupying the territory of other countries that are far outside the boundaries of their nation. So when Trump talked to his relocation plan for Gazans, it's not a plan because there's no. Alex and I have both made this point. There's no substance behind it. Because Trump said, we're not going to put troops on the ground. Okay, then who's going to supervise moving those people? And we're not going to pay for it. And we're not going to build these brand new cities that they're going to love, according to Trump. There's no plan, but in putting it out there, it looks like it has forced Egypt and the rest of the Arab world has now come together saying, hell no, you're not going to do that to the Palestinians. And they're putting together a plan to rebuild Gaza and keep the Palestinians safe there. And they're going to pay for it. Maybe that's what Trump wanted. Maybe that was the entire intent of what he said. Who knows? But when talking to Putin about the Middle East, Putin's going to explain Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. So this talk about attacking Iran to take out the nuclear facilities, that's a non-starter. And if you do that, then you're going to run the risk of a confrontation with us because we're assuring and guaranteeing that they're not going to have nuclear weapons. That he's got 1.5 to 2 million citizens of Russia that are also Jews, considered citizens of Israel. He's got a concern there to make sure that nothing happens that could jeopardize their lives, but also wanting to see something positively done for the Palestinians. But a lot of what Trump does is this, it's a negotiating trick. It's an act, and it's designed to produce a certain effect. I anticipate that Trump's trip to Moscow will coincide with May 9th, the commemoration of the Great Patriotic War that defeated the Nazis. Xi Jinping will be there. So this could be the first big meeting between Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping. So I think that's what Trump's looking at down the road. He's not focused on ending this war next week. He's focused on getting, bigger picture, getting back into at least constructive relations with both Russia and China.